There is an invisible force that guides encounters that defy logic. Among billions of souls, why do we feel that certain glances pierce through layers of the soul and awaken something dormant within us? When two people meet and something greater than them seems to take control, we are facing synchronicity, a concept deeply explored by Carl Jung. These encounters are not accidental. They are orchestrated by something beyond reason, yet they resonate powerfully in the unconscious. Have you ever felt that someone entered your life as if it were written in the stars? The feeling of reunion, even without a shared past, may be a sign that a true soul has been sent by the universe. In this video, we will explore how to recognize that profound calling and what analytical psychology has to reveal about it. Comment below. I believe in the encounters the soul recognizes. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the true meeting of souls is far more than a romantic coincidence. It is a profound manifestation of the psyche in search of wholeness. Jung believed that every human being carries unconscious archetypal images within, among them the anima, the representation of the feminine in the male psyche, and the animus, the representation of the masculine in the female psyche. These archetypes not only influence how we choose our partners, but also guide us toward integrating our own inner selves. When someone enters our life and awakens intense feelings, there is a strong chance they are embodying these internal archetypes. We call this projection. We deposit onto the other characteristics that in truth belong to our own unconscious. However, in genuine encounters, this projection is not merely illusion. It is a summons to recognize aspects of ourselves that have not yet been integrated. Through individuation, the process by which a person becomes who they truly are, these encounters serve as catalysts. They are like mirrors revealing not only love, but also shadows, wounds, and unrecognized parts of ourselves. In this context, the soulmate does not come to complete us, they come to awaken us. And that awakening is rarely comfortable because it forces us to look at what was hidden. Thus, when the universe sends someone, it is not to save us, but to transform us. And it is in this movement, between light and shadow, between desire and pain, that we recognize the true meeting of souls, the one that echoes not only in the heart, but in the depths of the unconscious. In the most intense relationships, those that sweep us off our feet in a sudden and inexplicable way, we are often not merely getting to know the other person, we are, above all, re-encountering unknown parts of ourselves. Carl Jung defined this phenomenon as projection, the unconscious transfer of internal contents onto external people. In romantic love, this projection plays a central and often deceptive role. We see in the other what we desire, fear, or repress within ourselves. The fascination we feel is less about who the person really is, and more about what they symbolize within our psychic world. When someone enters our life, and we immediately feel that we know this person on a deep level, we may be witnessing a powerful projection of the anima or animus archetypes. The figure of the soulmate often emerges when these archetypes are activated. The image of the ideal person, one who completes us and makes us feel there is something transcendent in the bond, may be more linked to our unconscious than to the other's objective reality. That does not mean the feeling is false, but rather that it is charged with symbolic, ancestral, and psychic content. The risk in this process is that we end up loving an image, a mental construct, instead of the real person. The relationship then becomes a field of idealizations, where the other is not seen as they are, but as we wish them to be. This inevitably leads to disappointment because no one can endlessly sustain the burden of an archetypal projection. Yet, when recognized, projection does not have to destroy the bond. On the contrary, it can be the beginning of a more conscious and profound love. Jung invites us to see the other as a mirror. The intensity we feel is no accident. Love projects our deepest longings, but also our wounds, our fears, and our shadow. When we fall in love, we do not just meet the other, we meet what is asleep within us. That is why true relationships are, above all, invitations to self-knowledge. In this sense, the soulmate is less a romantic destiny and more a portal to inner transformation. They appear not to fill the void, but to illuminate it. By activating our deepest projections, this encounter confronts us with what needs to be seen, healed, and integrated. The qualities we admire in the other are often potentials within us that have yet to develop. Likewise, the conflicts that arise reveal parts of ourselves we have rejected or ignored. The challenge lies in distinguishing what is projection from what is real. This requires courage, reflection, and presence. It demands that we move beyond the initial enchantment and come into contact with the truth of the other and ourselves. Only then does love cease to be a fantasy and become a genuine bond. In this process, projection stops being a trap and becomes an instrument of evolution. By understanding the dynamics of projection in love, we learn to view encounters with greater maturity. We recognize that the soulmate is not a perfect being, but someone who, by reflecting parts of us, helps us grow. When the veil of projection begins to fall and we still choose to stay, we shift from loving the image to loving the being. This is the point at which the true bond forms, when we stop seeking in the other what we lack and begin walking side by side, with consciousness, respect, and depth. Projection is not the end. It is the beginning of the inner work that true love demands. And when we embrace this, encounters become not just romantic, but spiritual. Every true meeting of souls is, in essence, a milestone on the journey of individuation. For Jung, to individuate is to become what one is in essence, a path that requires courage to confront shadows, integrate internal opposites, and abandon masks. In this process, relationships serve as profound catalysts. The people who cross our path with intensity do not appear by chance. They emerge because the psyche is ready to take a step toward wholeness, and the other person becomes the necessary mirror for that movement. The soulmate is not a final prize, but an instrument of self-discovery. In moments when an encounter feels magical, laden with meaning and synchronicity, it is as if the unconscious gently pushes us toward the next stage of our psychic development. But this advance rarely occurs without friction. The other awakens in us dormant emotions, unconscious patterns and memories that must be revisited for integration to happen. In individuation, we seek to unite the conscious and the unconscious, accept our contradictions, and harmonize the opposing poles of the psyche. The other, in this context, becomes a mirror not only of our desires but of the parts of ourselves we have rejected. In relating, we project our internal contents onto our partner, but we also receive their projections in return. The relationship becomes a symbolic field where two souls, consciously or unconsciously, work to evolve. That is why true encounters, despite often being romantic, are not merely sweet and harmonious. They can be challenging, confronting, even painful, not because they are wrong, but because they are too right for us to remain the same. They serve as portals of transition between who we are and who we are destined to become. And this kind of transformation only happens when there is depth of connection and surrender. The soulmate is the one who shows us, with love and intensity, where we still need to grow. It's not someone who spares us from pain, but someone whose presence forces us to face what we avoid. Jung spoke of the reunion with the self, the deepest instance of being, and it is precisely this reunion that becomes possible in relationships that challenge the surface and dive into the soul. Often, the encounter with a soulmate coincides with a moment of crisis or profound inner change. It is as if the universe says, "You are ready," and then someone appears, not to make the journey easier, but to intensify it. The connection is so powerful that it resonates on unconscious levels, activating symbols, emotions, and ancestral archetypes. This generates a transformative energy field. The relationship becomes alchemical, a true inner work where both are simultaneously the alchemist and the material in transformation. Throughout this process, the ego is gradually dissolved and reconstructed. Masks fall away, illusions dissolve, and something more authentic begins to emerge. This movement is painful but also deeply liberating. The soulmate is the one who truly sees us, who breaks through the defenses of the ego and touches something we ourselves had not accessed. And that vision can be uncomfortable, but it is also healing. At the heart of individuation lies integration, of light and shadow, of masculine and feminine, of reason and emotion. The soulmate actively participates in this, not as savior, but as mirror and companion on the journey. When both are aware of the bond's transformative role, the relationship becomes sacred, not in a religious sense, but in a deep psychological sense, a space of encounter between evolving souls. Therefore, recognizing a soulmate is not only feeling overwhelming love, but perceiving that this love calls us to become more whole. It is understanding that the intensity of the encounter is not an end in itself, but the beginning of a transformation process that can lead us to more authentic versions of ourselves. In this context, true love is a path of shared individuation. There are moments in life when everything seems to align mysteriously. An apparently random meeting, a conversation in an unlikely place, a deep sense of déjà vu with someone who has just arrived. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, the simultaneous occurrence of events connected by meaning, but without an apparent causal link. When it comes to the meeting of compatible souls, this concept becomes even more powerful, because the universe, through the symbolic language of the unconscious, seems to conspire for two people to meet at the exact moment they are ready. Synchronicity is not magic in the common sense, but it is deeply symbolic. It reveals that a greater intelligence guides psychic life, and that certain encounters are not random, but expressions of the collective unconscious acting in reality. When two souls connect intensely and inexplicably, it is as if their paths were prepared in advance by invisible forces. These forces do not follow the linear logic of time, but obey the soul's symbolic rhythm. In this context, the idea of destiny is not a rigid imposition, but a natural inclination of the psyche to seek what it needs to become whole. Just as nature tends toward equilibrium, the soul also seeks what complements it, not in dependence but in expansion. The universe then acts as a mirror of this inner quest, organizing external events to reflect what is ripe to emerge within us. Encounters born of synchronicity are marked by a sense of profound meaning. Small details become symbolic. Words, glances, dates, places all seem to carry a message. And this is not illusion. For Jung, the symbol is the language of the unconscious, and it manifests both in dreams and in reality. When we meet someone who awakens this symbolic language, we are not just in front of a person, but of a psychic process in action. The soul recognizes the other before the mind comprehends. These encounters do not follow conventional logic of time and space. They sometimes occur after long periods of solitude, after losses, or when everything seemed stagnant. It is in those moments that the soul is most open, most receptive to change. The universe responds to that inner state by bringing the right meeting, not necessarily the most comfortable, but the most necessary. And that is why compatible souls do not always appear to make life easier, but to move it forward. Jung believed that synchronicity was a bridge between the internal world and the external world. When there is alignment between what the soul needs and what the universe offers, synchronicity manifests. This requires presence, listening, and sensitivity. We often ignore these signs because we are stuck in rational logic, but the soul recognizes, and when something touches us deeply and inexplicably, it is important to stop and observe. It may be that the universe is offering us a decisive step on the path of individuation. Compatibility between souls is not limited to shared tastes or values. It expresses itself through the capacity to provoke mutual transformation. When two people meet through synchronicity, the relationship becomes a fertile field for expanding consciousness. There are challenges, but there is also growth. The connection is so significant that it transcends chronological time and anchors in the timeless. Some call this destiny, others call it mission. Jung would call it manifestation of the self, the psyche's organizing center that guides the individual toward realizing their full potential. These encounters are gifts of life, but they are also calls to responsibility. They require emotional maturity, willingness to delve into the depths of the soul, and courage to sustain the bond's intensity. When we understand that the universe acts as co-author of these meetings, we begin to value each significant connection more, not as a happy accident, but as part of a greater symbolic order that guides the soul toward what it came to experience. Deep love, the kind that transforms and bears the soul, is not made of light alone. It also carries the shadows we avoid seeing. Carl Jung was emphatic in stating that no one becomes enlightened merely by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of encounters with soulmates. They do not come only to complete, but to reveal. And what they reveal are often parts of ourselves we have rejected, denied, or hidden, the so-called shadows of the psyche. For Jung, the shadow represents everything we do not recognize in ourselves. It contains both negative aspects, fears, traumas, and destructive patterns, and forgotten or undeveloped potentials. When a soulmate enters our life, they do not illuminate only what is beautiful, they also activate what needs healing. This happens because the bond is so deep that it breaks down psychic defenses and allows hidden truths to surface. This kind of love is uncomfortable because it forces us to look inward. As we draw closer to the other, masks begin to fall. We can no longer sustain artificial roles. The soul recognizes the soul, and that transparency brings us into contact with wounds we might not even have known existed. The relationship becomes a brutally honest mirror, where we see not only the other, but ourselves. With all our contradictions, vulnerabilities, and ambivalences, the presence of a soulmate awakens in us a movement of healing, but not through relief, instead, through confrontation. The other, by touching our wounds, allows us to finally access them and heal them consciously. That does not mean the relationship will always be harmonious. On the contrary, there will be conflicts, ruptures, and reconciliations. There will be silence, anger, and also forgiveness, but all of this is part of the psyche's reintegration process. True love is not a fairy tale. It is an alchemical journey where the ego transforms and the soul expands. In this process, suffering plays an essential role. It is not desired, but it is necessary. Without it, there is no emotional maturation. The pains provoked by the soulmate are not punishments, but invitations. They show us where we are still incomplete, where we still need to embrace parts of ourselves that are marginalized. And that acceptance is the first step toward healing. When we stop resisting and begin to understand that the other is revealing ourselves to us, the relationship ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a sacred space of self-knowledge. To love a soulmate is to accept that the other has come to show us the truth. That truth will not always be pleasant. Sometimes it will come in the form of separation, disillusionment, or a clash of values. But even in those moments, the bond fulfills its purpose. Awakening. Not every soulmate remains in our life forever. Some come only to initiate an internal process, open a wound that needed healing, point to a path we needed to follow. And once that mission is accomplished, parting can also be an act of love. On the other hand, there are souls who stay, who grow together, who learn to navigate between light and shadow with awareness and compassion. In these cases, love becomes a spiritual practice, a mutual dedication to each other's and one's own flourishing. Intimacy goes beyond the physical or emotional. It becomes psychic, symbolic, profound. The relationship ceases to be an exchange of expectations and becomes a co-authorship of transformation. The true role of the soulmate, therefore, is not to provide constant happiness, but to allow the soul to see itself, accept itself, and transform. It is a kind of love that heals because it confronts, that embraces because it understands, that illuminates because it first dives into darkness. This love does not exhaust, because it does not depend on external circumstances, but on an internal commitment to truth and wholeness. And that is why, when we find a soul who makes us grow even amid pain, who stays even when we are forced to shed our illusions, we must recognize the rare gift this represents. It is not an ordinary encounter. It is an encounter that echoes in the eternity of the psyche, and that leaves deep marks not only on the heart, but on the soul itself. Throughout this journey, we have seen that true encounters do not follow the logic of reason, but the symbolic language of the soul. Through the concepts of projection, individuation, synchronicity, and shadow, we realize that authentic love does not come only to give pleasure but to provoke growth. Soulmates are not perfect, nor are they sent to complete us. They arrive to confront us, to reveal us, and to transform us. They are living calls to consciousness, instruments of the unconscious reminding us of what still needs to be integrated. When we understand this role, we stop seeking love as an escape and begin to live it as a path. The universe does not send someone to save us, but to reflect us. And in that reflection, we recognize ourselves more fully.